I'm joined now by two members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Tonda MacCharles is the national political reporter for the Toronto Star, and Janet Silver is a managing editor at iPolitics. Both of you, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay, I wanted to start with, there's been so much going on today, but let's start with the Prime Minister, his latest briefing with reporters and through them to Canadians on the standoff for the protesters. What do you make of it? What stands out for you, Tonda?
What stood out for me was that this was the Prime Minister who has all along said he doesn't direct police operations, nonetheless very aware of a coming crackdown and issuing a notice and a warning to protesters that with the new state of emergency in the province of Ontario and all the reinforcements that the RCMP and the OPP have sent to Windsor and Ottawa, there's a big crackdown coming. He has tread a line very carefully all through this. He said again today he's not using or invoking federal emergency measures to bring in the military, that this is the police matter. He raised a really interesting doubt, I think, and concern about the planning and approach of the Ottawa police to this ongoing 15-day protest here. But yeah, no, he's clearly signaling to protesters that it's about to get very rough. Okay,
Janet, what did you take from that? What stood out for you?
When he said all options are on the table, he made a very direct appeal to the truck protesters, saying it's time to go home. Just picking up on what Tonda was saying, if you don't, there's going to be huge fines, which is what Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, said earlier today, up to $100,000. There could potentially be job penalties. Police will use the force that they need to end the blockade. Mm-hmm. They are putting everything out there that this is it.
Okay, well, and you both alluded to it then. Let's get to the other big announcement today, and that was Doug Ford from Ontario, from Toronto, his announcement of a state of emergency, a provincial state of emergency. The two obviously fit together. It's been so long, though, that these situations have been going on. We're in the 15th day of the blockade in Ottawa. We're in the 5th day of the occupation or the interruptions at the Ambassador Bridge, and Doug Ford now comes out. What do you make of his statement today?
Very clearly, look, we've had the impact of the border blockage at Windsor has changed the equation politically for everybody. Look, it's 15 days now that Alberta at the Coots Crossing and here in Ottawa has been jammed with trucker convoys. And I think the economic blow to the auto manufacturing industry and the layoffs we've seen and the pressure coming from the U.S., that changed everything. Why now remains a big question. Why has it taken so long for the province to act, for the feds to signal their intentions? Were they all afraid of looking like they would embolden protesters or look like they were caving? But I think that is a big backstory we hope to hear over the coming days.
Janet, what about, Tonda made an allusion to it, and the Prime Minister was asked about it. Tonda, I think you asked him about it, but also Doug Ford. The connection with the United States. When we have reports that Homeland Security is offering help, when the Governor of Michigan is talking about the economic impact, and where there's a discussion between the Prime Minister and President Biden about the economic impact, and he supposedly assured the White House that I'm getting on this.
Well, yeah, because it also draws in the whole question. If you look south of the border and they say, look, we'll help, we'll send in, whatever assistance you need, then you start to ask questions about jurisdiction, right? And whether or not we do have control over, Canada has control over its own border. There's huge pressures. Look, we're talking thousands and thousands of people who haven't been able to work. That standoff on the bridge, Ambassador Bridge, that connects Windsor to Detroit, that started on Monday evening or sometime on Monday. There's a lot of jobs at stake, a lot of businesses in downtown Ottawa that has closed. What's going on in Coots, Alberta, which is affecting livestock being transported between the borders. It's to a point where there's so much on the table economically between the two countries. And when you hear Republicans south of the border going, look, if you can't do it, it's another reason why we need to do Made in America, that sends a real chill down a lot of spines when you think of just how much potentially could be lost if the blockades aren't brought to an end in terms of jobs that could go elsewhere.
I think that's a point we've heard from, especially from Ford, but also from industry, that this is really doing damage to Canada's reputation as a reliable trading partner. And in an era where all countries are trying to sort of, retrench, and especially south of the border, the Buy America movement is so strong. This kind of handicaps a lot of people's ability to say, no, Canada's reliable pipeline.
Okay, I want to look at the domestic, and by that I mean Ottawa politics. This time last week, we were talking about Candace Bergen, the then just newly minted interim leader of the Conservatives, and we were looking at an email where she'd encouraged her MPs not to call for the end of the occupation of Ottawa. Now we have a change in positions. Candace Bergen and some of her MPs are saying, no, the truckers, it's time for them to go home, as well as the truckers in Coutts, Alberta, and the truckers at the Ambassador Bridge and elsewhere. But at the same time, you have the man who would like to have the permanent job as leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, openly running and openly being continuously supportive of the truckers. What do you make of it? Tonda?
Yeah, I mean, 2 days ago, he said the Freedom March, is moving onward, keep it going. He is directly trying to appeal to the broad swath of Canadians who may not be even in alignment with blocking a legislature or a border point, but are fed up with restrictions. And we know from polls that a lot of people are fed up with restrictions. So this is a blatantly, baldly populist appeal by Poilievre to get votes to line up support for his bid at the Conservative leadership. And, we'll see how it resonates. But there are a lot of people pretty concerned about the rhetoric and the positions the Conservative Party has taken, a party that traditionally has been the law and order party, all about, peaceful, democratic process, all of that. And after the last 2 weeks in the shifting positions of the party, of its interim leader, of several of its prominent members, I think a lot of Canadians could be forgiven for wondering what on earth does it stand for? Yeah,
Janet, your thoughts on the Conservatives? Because I have one last question about a little bigger picture.
Well, I guess just to go back to the United States again, when you see and hear a lot of Republicans south of the border, and I'm pointing to people like Ted Cruz, for example, Republican out of Texas, going, yes, we support the Freedom Convoy, go truckers, go. And you hear that kind of message, and those are the same Republicans that did not condemn the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. There are a lot of people that are going, wait a second, is that the way that the Conservative Party is going by touting and supporting the truckers? It does leave a lot of questions out there as to how far down that road some in the Conservative Party are willing to go, and what kind of divisions that could potentially mean for the party, for the more moderates, and where they go.
Okay, a last question is a bigger question. That is, what do you think Canadians should make of it, or what do you make of it? The fact that we have these protests going on, and at the same time, we have provincial governments galloping towards removing vaccine mandates and other measures, and we have the federal government saying that it is going to be revising some of its border measures. What do you make of, is it a risk or is it just reality, the perception that political pressure and protests are now influencing public policy more than public health?
Well, public policy has always been affected by public perception. Public health wasn't supposed to be. But I think we can see that across the country, the disease picture is different in lots of different jurisdictions. I don't think there's any question in many people's minds that some of the easing and the quick lifting of everything, for example, all mask mandates gone for children in Alberta soon and that sort of thing, there are lots of questions about just how politically influenced those decisions were. But the disease has evolved, and the federal health authorities today said that we can't avoid the reality that Omicron has peaked. It is also impossible to sustain, the belief that we can eliminate it or eliminate all risk of importing it at the borders. So for sure, political and public perceptions have affected this, but certainly on the federal scene, at least what they're saying is that public health evidence and science-based policy is what's driving the bid to next week change some of those measures.
Yeah, Janet, is there not a political risk for the Prime Minister and his government if they're seen as caving to illegal protests?
Well, exactly. There is a risk for that. But therefore, that's why when he was asked about that today, he was very careful in talking about they go back to science and pointing to science as being their way forward. And I would add one thing in terms of what Tonda was saying as well. We've got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, and we're watching sports games that happen in the United States, and you see auditoriums and theaters, they're filled to capacity with spectators. And here in Canada, it's a very different situation. I think there's a lot of pressure to say, we're 2 years into this next month, and it's not as serious in terms of death and hospitalizations and ICUs. Maybe it is a chance to try to ease up a little bit. There's a lot of pressure from business and other groups to do that, but this government is always, quick to say we will ease up as science allows us to do that. They rely on science for that information.
Okay, Janet Silver, Tonda MacCharles, thank you both. Thanks for taking the time, and we'll speak again.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.